All right, welcome back, everybody. Thanks again for being here at our event. Yep, I'm seeing the room load up slowly but surely. We've got all these hardcore nerds attending this event. It's the best. It's one of the most wondrous things I've ever done with my life. All right, let's see.
I mean, when you started planning, there was some of this was the wonder of like, are there enough people in the learning and development field who would be interested in this and who would do it? And I remember talking with Matt Pierce about it at Techler, and he's like, yeah, I think there actually are quite a few. We aren't like, not everybody's been vocal about it, but there actually like are a lot of people. So I since this is the right audience for it, I decided today was the right time for my things could be worse mug. This is, like from a distance it looks like it's just, Blue Willow design, except there's actually giant robots and monsters and pterodactyls and I don't know, a swamp monster. I have placemats of this. We had them on the dining room table. My parents came to visit. We just had them on the dining room table and didn't tell my parents. My mom went for 3 days before she noticed. She just thought they were like a very classic Blue Willow. She thought it was, she commented on how much she liked them, but had not looked close enough to notice how absurdly nerdy they were.
That is very nerdy, and even better, it's from Calamity-Ware. Is that what I'm seeing?
Calamity-Ware is the company name. So if you're looking for Christmas gifts for the type of person who would attend this kind of conference and likes tea, then if you've got people who are in that Venn diagram of people who attend this conference and like tea, these are great presents.
Done. Bookmark. I got to look at those more closely. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right, everybody. Well, I guess we're going to get started. Everyone in the audience, hopefully you already know who Christy Tucker is. Christy has the most incredible blog, probably one of the most valuable resources available online is Christy's blog. Is it just at christytucker.com? No.
It's christytuckerlearning.com.
Christy Tucker. I need to make sure that everyone has access to that because there you go. It's one of the best things ever. Whenever I'm searching for anything, even before events, if I'm like, okay, who can talk about this idea that I have? It's Christy that always comes up. Like, it's like, oh, she just spoke at the last 6. So we're back again.
Yeah, people ask me questions and it's like, funny you should say that. I have a blog post about that. And this is
right.
my answer to like all the questions. Because,
right.
Like,
so
15 years of blogging, I've written about a lot of topics. So
amazing. You are just a wealth of knowledge. Elearning. I don't actually have the bio in front of me, but I do know what you are going to be talking about: leveling up your e-learning, character creation for scenario-based learning. I love that, Don. Christy is ID Worlds. There's an app for that. We need to, I'm going to, now every time I think of you, Christy, I'm going to think about Don saying that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let you take over. My voice is once again going out. So I'm going to go ahead and hide myself from the screen and enjoy what you have to say.
All right. Well, I am going to bring up my slides here. And if you can all give me a, all right, I see lots of thumbs up. You can see the slides. Very good. So this is going to be talking about character creation and definitely with the bit of a D&D spin to things to fit the event here. So if you had seen my little profile photo in here, and I think on the schedule, this is Violet. And I'll let you read her bio. This is one of my characters for one of our current campaigns that we have in our group. So I, besides being an instructional designer, I'm an independent consultant. Title I give myself is learning experience design consultant these days. But I've been blogging since 2006, and that's where most people know me. My D&D background, like a lot of women in D&D, I got into it through an ex-boyfriend in high school, which would have been probably 1992, I'm thinking. And so I have been playing at least off and on since then. Our current group is a Tuesday night group. One of the couples in that group, my husband and I have been playing with, was trying to figure it out. It was before our daughter was born, and she's 10, so I think probably 12 years that we've been playing with that particular couple. But that group was the dad's night out game, except then they started hosting it at the house of that other couple. And the wife was like, how come I don't get to play? And then when she was playing, it was like, well, then I'm going to come play too. And therefore we did. So when you have D&D characters, you do tend to have some backstory for them, right? You know a little bit of their story and why they do the things that they do. And if you've played before, you've noticed that when you have some of this perspective for a character, it makes it easier to say, well, in this situation, my character would do whatever. And if you don't know that backstory, you come to a decision and it's less clear. Like Christy in her last session who talked about, taking risks with her character, that her character is chaotic good and takes the risks and things, that makes it easier if there's a situation where the decision is to play it safe or to take a risk, her character is going to take a risk. And it makes it easier to guide the decisions. In our work, if you're writing scenarios, either, scripts for beyond videos and animated videos, or mini scenarios, or branching scenarios, or interactive videos, all of these things, it is easier to write those characters if you know a little bit about them. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So thinking about characters. For many of you, you've seen lots of these sorts of character sheets. A character sheet is the record of the character. This is more detail than you should do for a character for a scenario for training in almost all circumstances. This is a character that I have been playing for months in a long-term campaign. And so, but the idea of having your details about a character somewhere, that I think is something that we can take something from as we create characters when we're using them for training. So we want to have some of these specific details in your character's backstory and your perspective. But specifically for training, now when we play D&D, often what we want to do is something that's kind of different from ourselves, right? It's fun to try on a role that's really different. But when we're creating characters for training, we want the protagonist, the main character, generally to be similar to your learners. And in fact, even if your branching scenario is going to be written in second person, where it is you are talking to the sales manager, you still have to think about how you're going to structure that character introduction and put them into a role. And you still sort of need to have some idea of that character and the things that they're worried about and what they're motivated by. So the job or the role, because most of us are doing workplace training, that job or role is really important. If the skills for managers, then the character needs to be in the role where they make managerial decisions. If you have multiple roles in your audience, you're going to probably go for the most common or familiar role, or the one that most strongly fits the audience. This is something that if you create personas for your learners, sometimes having the details of that end up being actually helpful in creating characters too, even though a persona is not the same as a character for a story. A persona is essentially the character in your audience that you're writing to, and the character is the character that's in your scenario, in the story that you are creating. So think about their goals, their motivation, the problems that your protagonist might have. You can also think about what they're afraid of, what they're worried about, what frustrates them. Gender and race and diversity, I know that those are things that have been come up in multiple sessions. Think about, especially if you're depicting a character, thinking about how you're going to depict that character. In some audiences, in a general audience, it's probably a, even male female split. But like I've done training for WIC counselors. WIC is the Women, Infants, and Children Nutrition Support Program in the US. That audience is about 80% women. And so the characters in my scenarios tend to be more women than men. There's always some men present too, because they also deserve to be represented. But when I do things I've done specifically for Arizona WIC, which means it's heavily women, heavily Latina, higher Native American population, because that's who that audience is. So your audience needs to be reflected in your characters. And I think we can also look, Don brought up. So we have non-binary characters. And especially if you're looking at multiple smaller scenarios and where you have the opportunity to have lots of characters, then it makes it pretty easy to have one male character, one female character, one non-binary character. Not everybody is straight, not everybody is white and skinny. So I'll bring up diversity a little bit more later too, but you should be thinking about it right at the beginning with your characters. For global audiences, you also need to think about, what makes sense with that global audience as well. So one of the first things you need to do is thinking about who your audience is, who your learner is. As we've talked about AI bias, I used AI for the images, for almost all of the images in this presentation. And you'll notice by default, the AI comes up with a bunch of white characters. And you have to prompt around that. Different characters are going to work for different audiences, right? You wouldn't set up a scenario with a construction worker if your audience is in healthcare. But I definitely have seen instructional designers create scenarios for employees to practice making decisions, except the main character was a manager and making manager decisions. And so there was a disconnect between the kinds of actions that those characters could do. When you're thinking about your character, you need those specific details, right? We don't have D&D characters where the name is just like Bob or Bob to be named later, like something. You don't say just a manager in a scenario. Say Louisa or Carol or Mark or Hong Sup, because other than your NPCs, because if you don't have a name for them, it makes them be that forgettable NPC. It's the character who took an arrow to the knee. It's not really memorable. But giving the specifics breathes life into your scenario and brings it into focus. So there was a question in the e-learning heroes community this week about trying to make all scenarios, quote, gender neutral. I will say I'm not sure if the original poster was actually meant gender neutral in terms of making every character not have an obvious gender and avoiding doing gender, or if they were trying to say non-binary and didn't know the terms. But I definitely do hear people say, well, we want this to appeal to the broadest possible audience, so make everything generic. The problem is that generic is not memorable. It isn't sticky. And having specific details and making it concrete makes it easier for your learners to remember those characters in the scenarios. So as an example, connecting that character to the job and the work environment, of your audience. So let's say you're going to be doing training for new sales representatives at a company that sells STEM software to schools. So then a main character could be Matt, who started as a sales representative at Metric Success, is the name of this company, started 2 months ago. So he's pretty new to the job, past onboarding, but still pretty new. That gives me some specific details that tells me what kind of experience he probably has. Maybe I have a little bit more background about him. Maybe I would have some more backstory, but that already makes it easier for me to write Matt as a character. Just that amount of detail is a lot easier to write than new sales representative number 3. And again, if you're doing personas, you might already be doing some of these sorts of things. How many of you have done personas? Can I get some thumbs ups or something? Yeah. Okay. So you've done something. This is based on the template from Diane Elkins at Artisan Elearning, called a Pino, a persona in need of training. But you have these sorts of details, and if you have personas, then it does sometimes help you make characters that match those personas. If you're not, and I will say many of the details and things that we're doing today will also apply to when you're creating personas, even though that's a separate goal and a separate use. So how do we get these specifics? There are a bunch of name generators. And I'm going to put some links in chat for you. So there are a number of places where you can go name generators, because I realize if you're trying to do lots of, when you have lots of characters and you're doing this in particular, that you are probably not doing, you're not necessarily coming up with names. It can be tricky to come up with names. So I use name generators, so I'm not reusing the same names all the time. And let me bring up my slide here. So we're going to do a little bit of practice, and you're going to need those links to name generators. So here is the practice activity. So you've got the audience. We're going to be thinking about characters. We're going to all be brainstorming together on a scenario. You're going to be training new and early career instructional designers with less than 2 years of experience about working with SMEs and avoiding and dealing with conflicts with SMEs. The objective is that instructional designers are going to collaborate with SMEs to create effective and engaging e-learning. So now, knowing that that's your scenario, and I'll have a little summary of this. Knowing that this is your audience and the training need, come up with a name. Give me an age of your character that you're going to have. And gender, if you want to note race, ethnicity, if you want to note other demographics. There are so many cool name generators out there. I gave you a couple of good ones. I will let you know that some of these name generators, so this one, that very first one on the list, just gives you a couple of like very quick names. Yeah, the pet one. Some of these also give you way more details. These are like fake credit card numbers and things. Some of these are designed to be fake data that you can put into forms. Or if you ever needed fake data to put into a database or screenshot or something for training purposes, these are useful for that, filling out fake data. And the Social Security Administration has one of the nice things here. Yes, they have the popular names, but you can go in by decade. And so if you've got a character who was born in the 1950s, you might pick a different name, right? Donna sounds probably more like a character from the 1950s than Olivia. All right. So Nick's got a character name. And I realize I've now just given you a whole bunch of name generators to play with. And the temptation is to go down that fun rabbit hole. All right. Jesse's got one, and at least a first name, even if you don't come up with a last name, even a first name gives you something concrete. And I like, Jesse, how you did Shahara 40 recently changed career. So we know something that she's like, that she's this is a recent career changer. Yeah, we have somebody who just finished his master's in ID. An Indian main character, right? And so that's going to give you some perspective of the, all of these are going to be the, are you in a workplace where everybody looks like you? Are you in a workplace where you're the only one who looks like you? Sometimes that affects the story. And even if it doesn't, it's at least representation. All right. Never meant to be an ID, plan on being a scientist. Right? So now you've got a little bit of backstory. I love this. Right? So we've got some young like teachers switching to ID, which makes sense, right? As an audience, that's going to be something that people can identify with. But also some late in life career changes and the plan to be something else and is an accidental instructional designer. I think all of that's already great, right? So these concrete details can be great. So now we can also think about the job and the role. What does that work environment look like? Is this somebody who's working for an e-learning agency where there's a team, or is this somebody who is who has to be a jack of all trades and do a little bit of everything because there's nobody else around to do it? If you're looking for business names, there are actually a number of business name generators out there, including some fancy ones that'll use AI for coming up with things. But you can come up with a kind of a company name as well. Random character traits generator. Yep. And for those of you who have played D&D, you've done these sorts of concrete details for characters a bunch. And so in some respects, some of those same some of those same skills that you've used in doing RPGs, you are using when you're creating a character for scenario-based learning. So I'm going to give you a minute. So we've got a company, Luminatech, and in a health technology. Nah, Caitlin just installs Grammarly and calls it a day. So as these are all coming in, right, we've got a chauffeur who runs a pirate radio station in his spare time. We've got someone working at a small family operated tech company. We've got a large community college. We've got an ed tech company that creates simulations. So all of these, every one of these is a valid, is a great start. And they're all going to lead to slightly different scenarios. And that also is part of what we want. So now we have to think a little bit. So thinking about your character, some of you have already started maybe a little bit of this. Thinking about what motivates or drives your character. What's the things that propels them forward? What's the worries that maybe holds your character back from being successful? And when we're doing this for training purposes, we need to tie this to a business problem or to a learning objective. So what do I mean by that? For example, if we think back to Matt at Metric Success, the company's been expanding, but the new sales reps are struggling to respond to objections, especially about difficulty to learn the software. That's the business problem that we're going to be working on training for. Well, so now that makes it fairly obvious. We can think about the main character, Matt. He's been in this role for 2 months. He's really excited. He wants to be successful, but he feels anxious when he talks to school admins to sell them this software, and they complain about how hard it is to and how long it takes to learn. So we've got some motivation to be successful in this new job, but also some worries and frustrations with how to do this. And so Matt's not confident being able to handle these objections. So we are still doing instructional design and not just stories for fun here, right? So this is a separate objective. We're going to take a little side quest from our main instruction designer. But if you were doing something like this, if your objective was new managers are going to provide constructive feedback to call center technicians after problems are identified in call audits. If you've never worked in a call center, audits, I know we are side quest, or we have to decide if we're going to heal the owl bear or not. But the think about what would be the goal for your main character if this was your learning objective. What's that? Your main character is going to be a manager, right? A new manager who's just been promoted. What's that character's goal? Give me a couple of ideas in chat. All right. Be able to provide constructive feedback or actionable feedback. Yeah. I like both of those. So sometimes the goal can be really obvious, right? Sometimes we might actually want to think a little deeper, because Peter brought up a good one here of like rectify the problems with the audits, because is the manager's goal actually to give feedback? Or is the manager's goal to have a high-performing team? Or help their employees be more effective at their job? Or improve the call center metrics and get a raise for themselves? Right? Identify the cause of the problems from the audit to help coach technicians to perform better. So sometimes there's the obvious goal, which in this case is sort of the secondary goal of like, we're going to provide feedback. The real goal is improve the team performance metrics. Excuse me. So this isn't the primary goal. That's the conscious goal that manager has, is I want my team to perform better. I want to improve the call center metrics. But the way you get there is going to be by providing the feedback. Neither one of these goals may ever explicitly appear in the scenario, but knowing that that's what your character wants can help you write that character. Yeah, primary goal might be the one that you're most worried about, right? It's the top of mind goal. And in some respects, this is a little bit of like your terminal learning objective and your enabling learning objective. You know, there's a very loose, tenuous connection here. The primary goal is like at the end of the day, the thing we want is for the call center metrics to be better. But the way we're going to get there is by helping provide constructive feedback so that they can deal with these particular issues that have been identified in the call audits when somebody's going and listening to the call afterwards. All right. So congratulations, you have completed your side quest. Back on to the main quest. So if we think back to our training for instruction designers, your character who's been doing that you've already been brainstorming about. No, you cannot level up. You do not have enough XP. But thank you, Tristan. There's no bodies to loot. So you don't actually get any gold coins. They all actually vanish right after you walk away. So think about your character. I know I'm so tough. So think about the character that you've been working on. So what drives this instruction designer? And I think we are going to get different answers for the new, right? So the newly graduated out of master's degree maybe is going to be driven by something else than the scientist who accidentally fell into instructional design. So I'm going to give you another minute. Yeah, I will say you can, yes, put in the Myers-Briggs type indicator and your disc profile for your character. Oh, no, don't do those. We aren't going to spend time on that. We have enough fantasy in what we're doing. All right, so Gen Z with student loans to pay is going to be motivated by bills and making enough money. That is absolutely a reasonable thing to do. So keeping a roof over her head in environmental education, right? Find that they have a good skill set, climbing the ladder of a job that could do layoffs at any time. I think Don's kind of jumping ahead to the next screen that I haven't shown yet. But right, so now we're thinking about like what are the things that drive your character? And okay, we're doing all of these details maybe you don't do this much detail for every single scenario that you ever write. But yeah, Dawn gets +1 inspiration. So, but maybe you don't do this much detail for everything that you create. But brainstorming, especially if you're not sure about things, and sometimes I find that if people are really like struggling to get started on a scenario, some of it is not having these sort of details figured out for your character, because doing some of this prep work makes it easier to write the story. In the same way that, doing your analysis and creating a design document to plan your training makes it easier to plan the training. Doing all of this work on your character helps make it easier to write the scenario. So the next one is thinking about those worries and fears. So we'd already kind of brought up the idea of, being worried about layoffs. But remember, we're talking about working with SMEs as the particular thing. So are there some things that we want to do where there's some specific challenges that your instructional designer character has had in the past working with SMEs that they're worried about, that they're afraid of, that are the challenges, that are the things that frustrate them? So worries and fears. Inexperience intimidates them working with SMEs. One of the great things about our job is that we get to work with people who are amazing experts in all sorts of different fields. Also, we work with people who are experts in all sorts of very different fields, and that is not necessarily very clear, that who maybe have decades of experience in some particular field and have deep expertise, and we're going to work with them and tell them that they should explain their stuff differently. So I will give you a minute to think about what your character's worried about. All right, so Peter says, frustrated that upper management doesn't invest enough into learning and development, doesn't give the SMEs the time needed to work with the IDs. Absolutely. Those set up some good conflicts and challenges for your scenario. Yeah. A younger character might be worried about not being taken seriously. I think that's absolutely something that we can have for our characters. Imposter syndrome, SME wrangling. Yep. Fear of alienating SMEs because the content can't happen without them. The area of expertise is totally alien. Yeah, right. We've sometimes worked with pretty intimidating. Some of us have worked with really intimidating content. Father CEO set his son to be the SME. Difficult to pin down for development. Doesn't want to change to e-learning for the company. Right. So all of these, we're getting really great specific details. Once you've gotten this, things get easier to write, right? You've already got bits and pieces of a scenario already written. Now, this character background, the things that you're putting in here, these are for you behind the scenes. This is essentially behind the game master screen. This is your knowledge to create the story. Just like the learners are never going to see it when you create a persona, they're probably never going to explicitly see all of these details, this backstory about the goals and motivation and fears and frustrations. But it does make it easier for you to empathize with those characters, to write them better, to figure out their actions and reactions. So as an example, when we put it into a scenario, sometimes in D&D, yes, we go around the room, hey, introduce your character and say who you are, right? We do that in D&D. Try not to do that in your scenarios. It's a little too much of a bludgeoning with when you do it like this. So maybe it's not that you say, hi, I'm here and here's all my backstory. But it does affect what we're doing, right? We say, oh, we've got an aggressive schedule and I'm trying to help the team keep everything running smoothly. You can see the connection between this goal of I'm the manager and I'm going to help them be productive. But I'm not explicitly saying that goal. So now we can also think about our other characters, our NPCs, our non-player characters. A little exaggeration can be good. Be cautious with this. Clark Quinn, who, if you saw the first D&D intro session in the pre-conference, he talks about doing one level of exaggeration. So amping it up a little bit to increase the emotional intensity, but don't necessarily go overboard, right? Maybe not the full stereotypical sleazy car salesman, but somebody who contacts you 3 times on LinkedIn asking for a 15-minute phone call is absolutely plausible. Think about the diversity, right? The goal is not to have everyone be the same. It's really the opposite. You need to make the characters different. So if you have more characters in your scenario, this is, again, a great opportunity to have more diversity. And think about lots of different dimensions of diversity. Diversity is not just gender and race. So it is, we had great diversity here, and like we had some different age. You could be thinking about, we can have body size, we can have natural hair. Yep. So all of these are aspects of diversity, and multiple characters means you can show diversity in multiple ways. Do you need a villain when you're doing D&D? Yeah, it's really helpful. For a scenario, for training, probably not most of the time. Most of the time, the villain that you're competing against is going to be some sort of competing values, or it's trade-offs and a lack of time or a lack of resources. People might be grumpy or self-centered, but we are not generally talking about the good versus evil. It's maybe different motivations. So there is going to be conflict. You do need conflict in a scenario, Jennifer. But it is the person versus environment sometimes. Or yeah, my villain is deadlines. If we take Simon as an example here, Simon is not a villain, but he is the character that your character could have a conflict with, right? He's really passionate. He wants everyone to be as excited about his thing as you are. He's been doing the in-person training for 10 years. He's really skeptical about this whole technology thing, and he's really worried that you're going to lose all the important stuff when you move it online. Simon is not a villain, but he is the antagonist in that scenario. As I'm looking at the time, I'm not going to have you go through and try to create this. There are sources for images for your characters. AI is not great at creating the same image in multiple poses right now. If you look at, but Tom Kuhlman's done some things about how to get it done. What he's really doing is creating a bunch of images and then tweaking them in Photoshop afterwards, to some extent. But you can look at this. Also, if you have an Office 365 subscription, you have some images within that. There are definitely stock photo sites that have other diversity, but not necessarily the one character in multiple poses that you often need for scenarios. So often, frankly, what I do is have vector images and edit them. Disability representation, I think we have to talk about specifically because it's so hard to find good pictures of people with disabilities. You can sometimes do it if you search for specific disabilities. If you're looking in general on stock photo sites, I will say that looking for particular assistive technology ends up being a good way to do this. You know, you're looking for limb difference. I will say missing limb also ends up being a good search term. A hearing aid or a cochlear implant, Down syndrome. Searching on stock photo sites for autism is a bit fraught. You can see what you get. But cerebral palsy, I've found some good images sometimes. Otherwise, taking vector images and editing them. Obviously, disability representation, we're only talking about visible disabilities when we do that. Yes, the sign language thing. Really great point that Jennifer just raised. If you choose someone using sign language, you need to make sure that they are actually using a sign. With global audiences, that's trickier because ASL is not the standard everywhere. If you look, there is a site called disabilityimages.com that does have images of people who actually have whatever the disability is that it's tagged as. Although I think they got bought into something else now. Into a different library. That has one where I know that where the sign language is actually sign language. So there's like families doing signing together. I am at this point looking at my time. I had some other things about doing challenges and consequences, but I planned more than I had time for, but I always try to overplan. So what questions do you have for me about creating characters? Yes, Glenda, I'm sure you've all appreciate that of the disability photo site that I mentioned. Let me see if I can bring it up. Disabilityimages.com, which I think, but you can actually, let me make this bigger because that is not big enough for you to see on screen. You can look by specific like syndromes or and these are much more real people. If you've looked for stock photos of people with disabilities before, you know that it's a lot of able-bodied people pretending to use a wheelchair. So avoid those. But you know, I do like these because, you know, you've got like somebody in a wheelchair shoveling snow, right? Like they're actually doing things. It's not just, or prepping food or whatever. So it's been a good resource for me in the past when I needed to do a lot of images for a particular course where we needed to show a bunch of different disabilities. And then I will bring up my contact info as well. If we're not connected on LinkedIn, feel free to connect with me there. Otherwise, my blog is there, christytuckerlearning.com. I do also have, I'll put another link in here. I have a little bit more as we were playing with name generators. I have a post about doing name generators. bring my contact info back up. So, and now you can level up, and now everybody gets 100 gold apiece. But you have to ask Luis when you're going to have an opportunity to get somewhere where you can spend that money.
We'll figure it out. We'll figure something out. This is great. Yeah, need to find a tavern. Well, I mean, this platform itself would be great for, I don't know, like between all the tables that are in the, sort of the lounge area and all these different things. I mean, we could have a massive gaming event at some point if we wanted to, but I better not quite go there yet.
Yeah, we probably should not try and, I mean, we can do stuff. We'll have my husband come in and show off his 75 mods he's got running in Foundry right now for his campaign.
Oh man. Yeah, that's a whole other conference. Well, this is great. We finally did it, Christy. Thank you so much for participating in this one. I just, yeah, once again, fantastic job. And I'm so glad that you were here and willing to share with us.
Well, I'm glad I was able to participate in this, and hope that you got something practical. I know that there's been lots of fantasy in this, and I did try to throw in lots of that for you all. But also to have that practical, you too can write stories. You can do this, and practice doing that.
Yeah. No, I think that's always one of the best comments is when somebody says, like Julia says, "Thank you so very much. Yes, this helped me." And that's one of the best comments that you can receive. All right, everybody. Well, I'm going to go.
Portfolio, I want to see it.
Oh, nice. I'm going to go ahead and close out the session. Now we got an hour break before Tristan Sylvester is up. Tristan is new to speaking with TLDC, and I can't wait. We've had a conversation in the past, and she also does, she runs a really large like Discord group too, that I'm so curious about. I haven't had the time to chat about that much, but anyway, come back, join us to close out the event. And thanks everybody. Thanks again, Christy. Hopefully we'll see everybody in an hour or so. And yeah, we'll see you around.
All right. Thank you all.